Assalamualaikum and good morning. My name is Supri. My number matric is 222779. Today I will briefly present the framework that governs forestry activity in Malaysia with a focus on the Samling Group case in Sarawak. Okay, let's go to the first one. Forest Ordinance 2015, Chapter 71. Under this law, companies like Samling are required to submit and follow a detailed forest management plan, ensuring that the activity are sustainable and legal. However, in this case, report suggests that Samling may have breached some of these conditions. Okay, the second one is Land Court, Chapter 81. Indigenous communities such as Penan and Kenyah people claim right to area where Samling operate. However, the state only recognized NCR land that was cultivated before 1958. This has caused serious dispute, as many indigenous groups said the government's definition is too narrow and their border traditional territory are not fully protected. Third one is Natural Resource and Environment Ordinance 2019. These assessments are meant to prevent environmental damage before logging begins. In the Samling case, some reports suggest that forest clearing may have started before proper environmental review were complete, raising question about the ordinance enforcement. The last one is Malaysia Timber Certification Scheme, MTCS. This certification system is designed to ensure sustainable forest management and compliance with international standards. One key requirement is free, prior, and informed consent from indigenous community. However, Samling has been accused of failing to properly consult effective village, which violates MTCS guidelines. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to how effective are these laws in ensuring sustainable and ethical forestry practices. The effectiveness of forestry law in ensuring sustainable and ethical practices in Malaysia, particularly in Sarawak because of the Samling company, remains highly contested. While Malaysia has established legal frameworks such as the Forest Enactment Act, National Forestry Policy, and mechanisms like Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme or known as MTCS under the Malaysian Timber Certification Council, MTCC. This enforcement often falls short because these laws are designed to promote sustainable forest management, SFM, biodiversity conservation, and respect for indigenous rights, but implementation is uneven and oversight is limited. One major challenge lies in the lack of transparency and accountability. For example, timber occasions are sometimes granted or modified without sufficient public consultation or environmental review. In the case of Samling Group and the Geranai FMU, the fact that logging and land clearing for oil palm occurred during the certification review periods exposes gaps in monitoring and enforcement. So, what the laws aim to do is to promote sustainable forest management, protect biodiversity and indigenous rights, certify timber through the Malaysian Timber Certification Scheme. The key challenges for this law is the weak enforcement of laws and regulations, the lack of transparency in timber concessions, limited involvement of indigenous communities, companies can bypass the rules. And the last one, why is it matters? Because it can lead to deforestation and loss of trust. Second, sustainable practices only on paper, not in action. And the last one, for stronger monitoring and community rights. And the last one, accountability.
My name is Muhammad Haziq Hafizuddin bin Rosdin and my number matrix is 222772. So my part present is implication of logging activities on indigenous to environment. So first is deforestation and biodiversity loss, whereas we know deforestation involves the large scale of clearing of the forest land, whereas they do for some purpose like agriculture, logging, and development of infrastructure. One of the consequences of deforestation is biodiversity loss, whereas some of the species they don't have sufficient food and shelter. Secondly is soil erosion and land degradation. When trees are cut down, their root system, which normally hold the soil in place, has been disrupted or destroyed. So without this natural support, the top of the layer of soil, they don't have any support, so it's become loose and vulnerable to erosion by wind and water. Lastly is water cycle disruption, whereas when logging occurs, this balance is disrupted. The removal of trees leads to reduced transpiration, which can decrease the rainfall in the area.
Okay, now we move to the implication of logging activities on the indigenous community. First is the loss of ancestral land and resources. Logging often leads to the destruction of forests that indigenous community have relied on for generation. These forests provide essential resources such as food, clean water, medicinal plant, and material for shelter. The second one is the marginalization and loss of autonomy. Many indigenous community lack formal recognition of their land ownership, making it easier for external actors.
Okay, so let's move on to recommendation that can be made to improve the enforcement of forestry law, which is the first one is to strengthen enforcement. With strengthened enforcement, we can increase the funding and capacity for monitoring agency, and we can use the technology such as satellite monitoring and drones. So the second one is to encourage sustainable practice, which is certifications schemes and promoting responsible consumption. Okay, so the third one is to enhance legal protection, which is we can recognize and enforce indigenous land right more robustly and implement community-based forest management. And the last one is to promote transparency and accountability, which can lead to public access to logging permits and enforcement data and strict penalty for illegal logging.